Welcome back. If you like our videos, remember to check out the description for very powerful recommended literature for you to expand and learn more about this topic. Immanuel Kant, 1724–1804, is often remembered as the philosopher who drew boundaries around what human reason can know. Living in the Enlightenment era, he inherited a world shaped by both religious tradition and the rise of scientific rationalism. For Kant, the central question was, what are the limits of human knowledge, and how does this affect our understanding of God, morality, and consciousness? His groundbreaking work revealed that while our minds cannot grasp God or ultimate reality through theoretical reason, we encounter the divine in a different way, in the moral law within us. In this video, we'll journey through Kant's thought in 7 sections, exploring how he saw reason's limits, the voice of conscience, and the path to freedom rooted in divine presence. Kant spent nearly his entire life in Königsberg, a small Prussian city. Though he lived quietly, his influence shook the foundations of philosophy. Educated in both the scientific discoveries of Newton and the theological traditions of Christianity, Kant sought to reconcile faith with reason. The Enlightenment was an age of confidence in human rationality, but also one where skepticism threatened traditional beliefs. Kant entered this debate with a radical proposal. Human consciousness is structured in such a way that it shapes how we perceive reality, and therefore we must distinguish between the world as it appears and the world as it is in itself. This distinction set the stage for his exploration of knowledge, freedom, and God. Kant argued that human knowledge is confined to phenomena, the world as it appears through our senses and categories of understanding. We never perceive reality in itself, the Noumena, which includes God, the soul, and ultimate truth. This was a humbling message. Reason, for all its power, has limits. We can measure planets and predict natural laws, but we cannot know God directly by intellectual means. Kant saw this boundary not as a failure, but as a safeguard, preventing us from reducing the divine to human categories. Consciousness, he insisted, must accept its limits. Yet it is within those limits that we find the space for faith, morality, and freedom. If speculative reason cannot reach God, Kant argued, practical reason reveals something equally profound: the voice of the moral law. He described this as the inner command of duty that speaks universally to human beings. This law is not imposed from outside, but is discovered within consciousness itself. Kant called it the categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim which you could will to become a universal law. In obeying this moral voice, we glimpse the divine order. For Kant, the moral law is not just a social convention, but a sign of humanity's participation in a higher, universal reason. Consciousness thus becomes the meeting place of the human and the divine. Kant emphasized that morality requires freedom. To act morally, we must act not out of compulsion or self-interest, but out of recognition of duty. This freedom is not license, but alignment with the deeper structure of reality. By following the moral law, we recognize the dignity of every rational being, treating others not as means, but as ends in themselves. Consciousness, in this framework, is not neutral. It is the seat of moral responsibility. To be conscious is to be aware of freedom and accountable for one's actions. This moral dimension, Kant argued, is the clearest evidence of our connection to something greater than ourselves. Although Kant denied that reason could prove God's existence in a theoretical sense, he insisted that belief in God, freedom, and immortality were necessary postulates of practical reason. The moral law within us points beyond itself, suggesting that justice and goodness require a divine foundation. Without God, moral striving would lack ultimate fulfillment. In this way, consciousness reveals the divine indirectly, not as an object of knowledge, but as a condition of moral experience. For Kant, God is not grasped through speculation, but encountered in the ought that resounds in the depths of our being. In one of his most famous reflections, Kant wrote, "Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe, the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me." The cosmos reveals order and grandeur, while the moral law reveals freedom and dignity. Together, they point to the depth of consciousness as a bridge between the finite and the infinite. The stars remind us of our smallness, the moral law reminds us of our greatness. In this synthesis, Kant captured his vision of human life. Reason discovers its limits in knowledge, but discovers its grandeur in morality. Kant's philosophy reshaped both philosophy and theology. He taught that while reason cannot know God directly, the voice of God is heard in the moral law within consciousness. This inner law does not crush individuality but elevates it, reminding each person of their freedom, dignity, and responsibility. Kant's legacy invites us to see consciousness not as a neutral mechanism, but as a moral field illuminated by divine light. His thought continues to inspire those who seek a spirituality that respects both reason and faith, both humility before mystery and confidence in the inner voice of duty. Immanuel Kant offered humanity a paradox. Our reason is limited, yet within those limits we discover our true greatness. We cannot know God as an object, but we encounter the divine in the moral law that shines within consciousness. This law points beyond ourselves, grounding human dignity in something infinite. Kant's vision remains a call to humility and responsibility, to recognize the boundaries of reason, but also to listen to the voice within that commands justice, freedom, and love. In that voice, he believed, lies the presence of God, not as a concept to be proved, but as a reality lived in the depths of the soul.